Hello, my name is Anuska and welcome to my channel and welcome to this week's video. And this week's topic is all about the #1 enemy to creating vocal change. But I'm going to add in little brackets, which you can't see, that you could apply this to any change in your life. Anytime you're trying to create change, you can apply this. And it was inspired by this book by Steven Pressfield called Do the Work, which I highly recommend you read if you haven't. And I will put the link below if you're interested in finding out more about this book. But I'm going to talk about this from both some of the things that Steven talks about in this book, but also from my own training and knowledge of Jungian psychology and how this shows up in our life. I'm going to specifically talk about this as it relates to the voice, but as I said, you could apply this to anything. So what is this magical thing? It is resistance. And I just want to read a little section from Steven's book because he talks about this in such a succinct way. He says, the enemy is our chattering brain, which if we give it so much as a nanosecond, will start producing excuses, alibis, transparent self-justifications, and a million reasons why we can't, shouldn't, won't do what we know we need to do. And it sums it up so well. Basically, the bigger the leap, the more important it is to us, the more resistance we're going to feel. And I'm going to talk a bit more about what that means, what that looks like. But essentially, it could be anything from an artistic pursuit, so singing, writing, photography, dancing, music, etc., through to starting a business, going for that big promotion at work, starting a podcast, starting a YouTube channel. Or it could even be things like getting married, starting a family, like anything where your life is going to change, resistance shows up. And the more important that is to you and the bigger the change, the more resistance will show up. In other words, it's anything that expands us, that moves us beyond our current paradigm and really moves us towards the highest and greatest version of ourselves. So as I said, I'm going to talk about this as it relates to the voice, my work with my own voice, my work with clients, and what I see in my interactions with people that contact me about voice coaching, that I work with their voice, and give you some examples of what this looks like. So first of all, what is resistance and sort of where does it come from? So as I said, I'm going to be using some Jungian psychology terms here, some of which I've talked about before, but some of them are very sort of mainstream, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of these terms before anyway. So first of all, we've got to understand that we all have what we call an ego survival mind. You might have heard of it also as the sort of the monkey mind, the chatter mind. It's the part of our mind that's sole job is to keep us safe and to keep us alive. And that's both physically and emotionally. And the only way it knows to do this is to keep us in the status quo. So even if you've had sort of really terrible things happen in your life, you're still alive. So the ego thinks, okay, let's just keep on that path, because we know that even if it's not exactly what she wants or he wants, it's kept him or her alive to date. So we're going to keep doing the same thing. Now, you might be able to create a little bit outside of that, but you're never going to create anything massively different when you stay attached to this ego survival mind. So then when you're trying to create really profound change in your life, the ego mind is going to resist because it's a direct threat to this comfort zone, this safety zone that it's created, that it knows has kept you alive. So when we think about the voice forms part of our persona, and part of the ego's survival kit is creating this persona, this face, this mask we wear in the world to help us fit in. And that's going to vary from person to person, but it could be, you know, being the pleaser, or it could be the assertive one, the one that people don't mess with, the person that speaks their mind and no one dares to kind of upset them. But we all have this persona, and it's going to vary to some extent in different circumstances in our life, but fundamentally it's the same. And our voice forms part of this persona. So our voice forms part of the persona that we've created. So when people talk to me about wanting to change their tone of voice, it's really rooted in this persona. and what the persona and the ego has decided is a safe way for you to express yourself. So when we create change with our voice, it is a direct threat to this persona. So let's say you're the people pleaser persona, which is a very common one that I see. The voice might be coming across as quite soft or gentle or apologetic or a little bit hiding. And then you go and work on your voice and wanting to create change, wanting more assertiveness, wanting to be heard, wanting to step out with more power. The ego is going to resist because that is in direct conflict to the persona that you've created. So your persona therefore has to change, and that is terrifying to the ego. It doesn't want your persona to change. It wants to keep you as the people pleaser, for example. And so often when I work with people, they really have a fear of being heard, being more powerful, expressing themselves with more assertiveness, because they know that that means they've got to confront parts of themselves that perhaps they've been able to push away their whole life, about what it means to be that person that expresses themselves more assertively. For example, this is just an example, but this is what I do in my private coaching with people. We explore this in much more depth on an individual basis. But hopefully you can see how the voice is very much tied to this persona, this way we show up in the world. So when we want to start to create change with our voice, the mind, the ego mind, is going to resist. So the vocal habits that we've created are not random. As I say, it could be like a soft, gentle voice that you've created. It could be speaking fast, speaking loud. You might have raspiness, croakiness in your voice. But in some way, if there's any way the voice isn't freely, openly, and powerfully being expressed, then you know that it is in some way protecting you. Because truthfully, the true voice for us all is free, is open, is expressive, and is unafraid to express itself. And that will vary. That might be gentle and soft one minute, that might be loud and assertive another minute, but it's not afraid to express itself authentically. So this isn't bad or wrong. We all have an ego, we all have a persona. It's just starting to identify with it as not being who we really are. It's just something that we have created to help us survive, to help us adapt, and to help us fit in the world. So what does the mind come up with when we begin to take that leap? We decide, okay, I'm going to sign up for vocal coaching. I really want to create change with my voice. What are the things that you can expect it to push back with? So number one is negative chatter. And we've all heard about this, the monkey mind, the chatter mind. And this is things like, and we all hear this all the time, things like, who do you think you are? You're not good enough. You're not ready. How can you spend so much money? You can't afford this. You don't have the time. This is a waste of money. You're going to fail. You're going to look silly. You're going to look stupid. It's all of that. This is all ego. It's all ego. You'll know when you're listening to the ego mind because it's all based on fear, limitation, and lack. Fear, limitation, and lack is always ego. So anything that's expansive, that's moving you forward, that's creating new opportunities, new possibilities, you know, is this higher mind, which is really where our true self lives. Another big one, particularly I think when people start training their voice, is sickness and illness. And the mind body is inextricably linked. So if there's a fear of creating change, often one of the things that can happen, and I talk about this from my own perspective, this has happened to me so many times over the years, that when I go to take this big leap in my life, like do a live show, I will always get ill. And it usually clears up in 24 hours. But in the moment, I'm thinking, oh my God, this is so bad. Is this ever going to go? Like I'll get a really heavy cold or something, which obviously as a singer really impacts my ability to actually sing. So the sickness is a big one because it appears to be a very good reason the ego comes up with to stop you. You know, well, you can't practice because you're ill, or you can't start that voice coaching because you're not well. But I say this to clients all the time, unless you've been told to have complete vocal rest by a doctor, unless you're lying in a hospital bed, or you've completely lost your voice, which in most cases, people don't fall into any of those three categories, then you have to keep moving forward. And there's always things you can do with the voice, even if it's on the very therapeutic end, there's always things you can do. I had a client once that got really chronic back pain, and I said to her, but you can still do the voice exercises lying down, sitting in bed. The thing is, if we buy into the ego's little ways of trying to stop us through illness or sickness, it will use that again. Now, this is not to say you don't take care of yourself. This is not to say you don't eat well, rest, get good sleep, etc. But it's that you see it for what it is, that it's your mind trying to stop you moving forward, particularly if you find that as you, say, for example, sign up for voice coaching, suddenly you get ill. And I see this a lot with people, and then they'll want to cancel their session. So my advice to you is to see this for what it is and keep moving forward. Keep doing something. Number 3, this is a big one, is busyness, time and busyness. And again, it's another good excuse the ego comes up with, because we can always say we don't have enough time. It's such a throwaway comment that we all use it. Oh, I don't have time to do that. I didn't have time. What could often happen as well, once we make a commitment to train our voice, all hell might break loose at work. Suddenly we are busier than we were the week before, or suddenly something happens at home and we are busier. Again, you have to see this as a reflection of your mind trying to pull you back. And the important point again is you don't let it stop you. So you might decide to get up 10 minutes earlier and do your voice exercises first thing. I often say to clients, just do them in the shower, do them when you're making breakfast, do them in the car when you're driving to work. There's always moments in the day which you can actually, if it's really important to you, you can find the time. And this is a big one for the ego, because it knows if you don't have the time to practice, your voice isn't really going to change. And remembering, coming back to the persona, it doesn't want your voice to change. It wants to keep you in the status quo. So it's a really good excuse the ego uses. And I would say the biggest excuses the ego uses, just period across the board, is time and money. Don't have the money, don't have the time. But truthfully, if something is really a priority in our life, we always can find the time and the money, always. If it's that important to us, we can make things work. We can move mountains if it's that important to us. So bear that in mind, because maybe it's not that you don't have the time or money, but it's just not actually a priority for you right now, but it's kind of owning it, because the ego will always use these types of excuses to pull you back. So what is the antidote to resistance, which we all feel? As I say, I've certainly still experienced this today. It's just I'm more aware of what I'm experiencing, so I don't let it stop me in the same way that it used to. So first of all, see it for what it is. When these things show up, when you suddenly get sick, or you suddenly get busy, or you start to have all of this negative chatter, see it for what it is, that it's your ego trying to pull you back to safety, to your comfort zone, because it fears change. That's all it's about. It fears change because it's unknown. It's scary because we don't know. The ego can't see beyond its own patterns. And it might appear to be in the external, but really it's your own mind that you're seeing in the external. Number 2 is let nothing stop you. And even if you have to just do 5 minutes of practice, if that's all you can do 5 minutes of practice. If you're not feeling well, just do something, because as soon as we start to buy into this, the ego thinks, great, well, if I give her a cold, then she just doesn't do anything. Or if I just make work a little bit busier, then it stops her completely. So don't let it stop you. Find a way to keep momentum going and to keep making it a priority in your life. So number 3 is remind yourself daily of why you're doing this. What is the bigger reason why you're doing it? And it needs to be a higher reason than a kind of survival reason. You know, I'm doing it for the money, or I'm doing it because I want people to like me. It's got to be a bigger reason. It's got to be connected to something that's really important to you on a deeper level. And you want to get really clear on that. Why am I doing this? And how badly do I want this? Coming back to this whole idea of a priority. Because if this thing is really important to you, then you will find the time. It's just, if it's not really a priority for you, I think Marie Forleo says this, if it's not a priority, we'll find an excuse. If it is a priority, we'll find the time. So you just got to be really honest with yourself. And I think that's just, then you can own it. You can own, okay, this isn't a priority for me right now, so I'm not willing to put the time in, versus I don't have the time. So you want to get really clear on this and remind yourself of this daily. You know, this is really important to me because I really want to help people with XYZ, or I really want to make a difference in this, whatever it is you're doing. So I need my voice to do this. I want to be able to express myself confidently and powerfully, whatever it is for you, fill in the blank. And just to leave you with something, truly, our biggest fear from the ego's perspective is change, because actually what it really fears is our success, which may seem a little bit crazy because a lot of people think what they really fear is failure. But failure is kind of known. We know what failure might look like. Success is really unknown. And often as well, we have a lot of judgment around what success might look like. So for example, it could be that I have to work really long hours if I'm successful. This was a big one for me. My dad was an entrepreneur. He ran his own business. I never saw him in the week. He worked insane hours. I only really saw him briefly at the weekend. So for me, being an entrepreneur and being successful meant you have no time with your family, you never see anyone, you're always exhausted. And that was my story for a long time, which is not true. So check in with yourself. What does success, what are you making success mean? Because that's really what you fear. So is it that you won't have time for your friends and family, for yourself? Is it something around visibility? Perhaps you're fearful of having more people watching you and listening to you, so you're open to be criticized more, or people ridiculing you, etc. All of this is going to be playing a role. Or is it something like responsibility? The more successful I become, the more responsibility I'm going to have, and that kind of scares me, and I'd rather let someone else kind of take the responsibility. So what is it for you? And you've got to get really clear, you've got to get really still and be really honest with yourself, and look at what triggers you in the world around people that are successful. Look at what stories you make up about them. You know, oh my God, well, they probably never see their families, for example, or, you know, they must just be exhausted. They must just never sleep, or, you know, they never have time to do anything fun. Like, notice that, because as I say, the ego really fears our success, and we've got to understand what we really fear about being successful. So another way you can look at this is to ask yourself, if I had everything I say I want, what is the downside with that? And really get honest with yourself about it, because it will stop you otherwise, particularly when you're trying to create change. You know, you're working on your voice because you want to build a business and you want to be out there more and speaking more, etc. But if you really have a fear of success and you're not conscious of it, you're never going to allow yourself to do the work. Coming back to this book, you're never going to allow yourself to do the work to actually have the thing that you say that you want. And working on our voice is so much more than our voice, certainly with the way I coach it, because I bring in the Jungian psychology, and the voice is really reflective of just generally how we see ourselves in the world and how we show up in the world. So the ego knows this. It's not silly. It knows all the passwords, all the codes to what to do to stop us. So if we understand what we're seeing, then we can, with compassion, honor that part of ourselves, but we don't have to buy into it. So thank you so much for watching. If you've got any questions or comments, I would love to know. As always, please do like, share and subscribe. Let me know if you have any topics you'd like me to cover in the future. And I will put the link below to this book if you're interested. The other book I've done a video on, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, based on one of his books, was called Turning Pro, which is another brilliant book as well. I'll put the link below to that one as well, because I think he's just a great author, and I'm not affiliated with him at all. This is just my own genuine love for his work. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on my next video.